All right, welcome everyone to our 2nd February Bay ICT Tech Talk. I am Olivia Hereford, and our guest speaker today is Krishnan Chellakarai, and he is CISO for Gilead. And we're going to do this informal, take the Steve Booth approach to this, and this, have Krish tell us about his role and about information security in the life sciences, and maybe a little bit about how his journey to this role. I think a lot of times what the students are interested in is, how do you get to the point that you're on? What do I have to do today to get there? And I'm sure depending on what you share with them, there will be questions in the chat box. So again, anyone, if you have questions for Krish as she's going along, please put them in the chat box. And my wonderful co-host, as always, Steve Booth, will be watching it as well. So anyway, Krishnan, take it away.
First of all, thank you, Olivia, for giving the opportunity. I'm really excited to talk to you, all of you, and these sessions actually helps us to also learn and type of question that you're going to ask me today as well, right? As Olivia mentioned, I'm the CISO at Gilead. I've been with Gilead for 7 years. If you're not familiar with the company Gilead, let me just briefly do one-liner on that. So we are a research-based biopharmaceutical company that helps discover, develop, and commercialize medicines in the areas of unmet medical needs. We have products in the market for HIV, HCV, and we also have entered into oncology space, right? And we have a few drugs in that. We have done some mergers and acquisitions with companies like Kite Pharma, which is actually focused on cell therapy. And then we also have companies we have merged with, Immunomedics, that actually has some products in that space. For during the COVID times, we also have a vaccine, a drug, antiviral drug for COVID as well, which is called Veklury, which actually helps for patients who are like severe, severe in their disease state, that actually can actually help them there as well. Now coming back to my own overall responsibility at Gilead, my responsibility is actually to define security strategy and strategic security governance, implementation of process and capabilities, and manage the end-to-end operations functions for information security, risk, and compliance at Gilead. Prior to coming to Gilead, I was with Roche Genentech, which is another biopharmaceutical company that I worked at for 9 years. I was the chief security architect there. Prior to Roche Genentech, I was also worked in Stanford Hospital for a couple of years. I worked on the Hipaa compliance and other aspects. And then before that, I was working in a lot of different product companies. I worked in a company called TIPCO. TIPCO is a company which actually builds, we have a middleware product that actually has a lot of market data and type of stuff. If you go to Yahoo Finance, the market data sticker symbol and all of the information that you see, that actually used to come from TIPCO. And we built a lot of the verticals, solutions for financial industries using the TIPCO software's product. The heat rate type applications that can be used even for foreign exchange transactions. If you wanted to convert from one currency to another, we used to have products in that space as well. And that's what actually got me into security, right? During that company, because we had to secure a lot of these financial transactions. And so I used to build applications, which actually called like a physical smart card. Like how you get a bank card where you have a chip, that's a smart card that you can actually use for you to make foreign exchange transactions online. And for the financial industries, they actually use that product. So that got me into building security solutions. That's where I got into PKI and different things, and slowly got into security. But before all of that, I was a lot of verticals that I worked on. I worked on financial industries, building applications and all of that. So I'm a math major by default. Mathematics was my number, so probably that's one of the reasons security was more easy for me to some extent. Made me so more passion because of the mathematical background. I probably can say that. But fundamentally building on application development and how you build as an engineer and building solutions. That's what actually got me into IT and building that, and then kind of got into security through TIPCO, and then I stayed on security for a long time after that. So I would say probably from 97, I've been doing information security. And then since then, I haven't actually moved out of that because that keeps me very interesting, right? If I can use a sports analogy, maybe cybersecurity actually gives me to play both offensive and defensive side of the game. So, somebody, what moves they are making then I need to be able to defend that, or sometimes I want to test my own teams to say if they're defending really well or not. So I may have to use some kind of a tactics to actually penetrate into my own network to understand gaps and stuff. Right? So that's my passion and journey. I can go on for a while, but if I want to talk about more specific in life sciences and pharmaceutical, right? There are a lot of different disciplines. If you get into financial industry, security is at most important, and you have to kind of feel like you're locking a lot of things down, right? And when you work in life sciences, you need to be able to be a little flexible in the sense that you need to have your research organization to do what they do best, right? They need to go to a lot of different sites. They want to interact with a lot of different programs where they actually do research. And then they also have a lot of IP, like our crown jewels, and we need to protect that as well. So without security becoming kind of in the hindrance, right? And how do I balance security and user experience or the business requirements? How do I strike the balance, right? So that actually was always a great challenge, and that's what I love about it, and that's the reason I stuck with healthcare and life sciences industry for a long time. I don't know if I'll keep doing it for another 5-10 years in this industry, or will I switch? Only time will tell. But now I'm very passionate on that. Well, let me pause there and see if you have any questions.
Add on there. So for anybody that doesn't know, Krishnan he's a CISO at Gilead, but he's also the founder of the nonprofit that I'm on that got me involved with all this stuff we're doing here. I would actually like to know what made you get into that, because I don't know. I just know you and I started talking about doing good stuff, but we never talked about how you got there.
No, definitely, Stephen. I think probably I may have to use a personal reference, and then I'll bring the message back, right? So when I came from India to US, right, in 1995, we all, being youngsters, we all grew up playing cricket. Cricket is a game like similar to baseball, right? And that's what we are so passionate about. So when I came here, I want to play cricket, and there is an association called Northern California Cricket Association. I joined that association. I joined one of the teams. I started playing cricket, and then in 2000, I joined their executive board, and I became a volunteer. So on the evenings after I come back from work, I volunteer for that association, and then on the weekends, that's where I do a lot of the scheduling, and we do umpiring and all of that. So for a sport that I'm so passionate about, if I can give, and since 2000, I still do today. So if I can give 21 years of my weekends and the evenings for that, why can't I do something for the job that I'm part of? And that's what actually started me thinking, right? So, and I wanted to do something back, like give something back to the community. I want to make a difference. So in 2019, during the holiday break, we started sitting it down and said, okay, I need to let me do some research and see what are the other nonprofits that's out there. What will make next gen be different, right? I don't want to be another nonprofit that starts and then say, okay, I'm also going to get into education. We want to really make sure that we make a difference. One of the things that I noticed that every nonprofits that's out there, they're all focused on very specific scenarios, right? Empower as a nonprofit focused on veterans, right? ICMCP is focused on women, and cybersecurity is focused on women, right? But then even having so many of these nonprofits, the demand is so much, right? A lot of people are interested and they want to get into it, but we're not able to supply, right? So I said, okay, we need to start a platform that needs to be, I have no constraints on like how many people we take as part of the cohort. That's what, I kind of put this thought together to say, we want to bring this technology providers that, all the cybersecurity solutions vendors that's out there, if we can use their power And if I can use the experts like Steven and myself, who's passionate about joining, if we can join hands with them and give them a platform for people who can get trained, who actually have real life experience in technology, that they can really use it for the job, right? And that was the theme that actually started get me going, and with one fundamental principle that everybody has something to give and everybody has something to take. As an example, I will give my time and talent, and I want to train people and help them get a job and be successful in their career. Not only just after you're placed in a job, how do you grow in that job from one role to another, right? And if you want to be, if you aspire to be a CISO, how do we make that happen so that it's the full continuum, right? And that's what I wanted to offer. And then the technology providers, Securonics is one example that we have the cohorts with. They will provide their lab and they will provide their solutions where they can take time to teach students. And then once they become certified in their platform, now you can work for Securonics customers, or Securonics themselves can actually acquire you into their organizations, because all these technology providers take a sales engineer and an account manager, and then they go into an organization and then they'll talk about how their product works, right? So now instead of taking an SC who actually get paid a lot more, then if I can augment that with one of our next gen students, now the company gets benefit, and they can also have more people trained on their technology solutions. So now that's what they give back. And what I expect for all the candidates who come through this journey, they go get a job and be successful. And then I want them to come back and then train others and pull more people to that journey. So the candidates actually have to get their successful career. That's what they take. And they give back by teaching others as well and bringing more people to the channel. So it's a program that it needs to sustain longer. Krish could be there tomorrow. Steven could be there, may not be there tomorrow, right? But this platform needs to sustain for longer without us being involved. More people can come and run with it. I mean, one day I'll allow to see Sheila run this program and then say, you know what, I'm going to run this nonprofit and run a chapter in one location in Southern California, Sheila. That's my dream. If we can make that happen, we actually have the multiplier effect, right? More people coming into the platform, and we're putting more people on the field for job. I know it's a longer answer, but that's what get me going, and we want to start making a difference. Do we have any other questions? Yeah, I see a good question there. How's the work to home life balance when it comes to cybersecurity? That's one thing that, if I have to put myself, I'm very bad at it, right? And, I'm not good in actually doing that, because, for me, the fear, right? The fire in my belly is like something's going to happen to my company. And I always constantly keep checking before I go to sleep, check my emails. Is there anything that's happening, and people can call me anytime if there is my security operations, which is 24/7, right? And we want to make sure that we are there to help them and support and jump in, right? There are a lot of things that's happening within the company, and also when you do this nonprofits and if you're doing cricket sports and everything else, I think at some point 24 hours is not enough for me. I think that's the challenge that I have. But that's my, if I have to learn from somebody, I think that's my learning experience, I would say.
It seems like the different jobs, like there's different job categories that have different work-life balance, right? The reality is in tech, every job's going to have surge time, right? If you're in finance, when it's quarter end, you're going to have surge time, but so nobody gets to go on vacation at the end of a quarter if you're in finance, that kind of thing. With us, it's one of those things where you plan out everything you can, and then if the attackers come, now you're on, right? And there's a whole thing we talk about where we're the people that run towards the fire, right? If there's a fire in the building, we're the ones that are running to put it out while other people are running away from it, right? That's just sort of so if that sounds like you, then this is a likely a place you'll find a home, right? But there's, the project managers or there's a whole bunch of different kinds of jobs. The software developers, they all have different work-life balances based on where they're at and the companies you're at, right? If you're working at a Facebook or a Microsoft, they spend a lot of effort trying to make sure you love your job because they don't want you to quit, right? You are by far the biggest resource they've got in the people that do the job, right? And all the best companies understand that. There's another question in there. As a CISO, how do you keep up with the latest tech and security news?
For me, that I read a lot of that there is a routine that we have. We have to go get into certain sites, the security alert sites that we have bookmarked. We also have a lot of memberships. Like I'm part of consortiums like HISAC, FSISAC, and we do get alerts actually from there. There are different. I kind of bucket them. If I want to really understand a lot of technology news, trends that's coming up and stuff that are like go to Gartner, or I have some certain tech forums that I'm member of, right? If I want to understand what's actually really happening on the security news, there are certain sites that I go and understand, and I get alerts from. We have membership in CISA. We have membership in threat intel platforms that can actually have a solution that can give us some information on. So there are a lot of different avenues. So we can compile that, and I can work with Steven, and I'm happy to share that as well. How you can go get technology trends, where you can go to understand the threats, and then the news that's coming out, right? So we can give you some information.
Do you have any podcasts you listen to?
Oh yeah, definitely. There are like some informations that in the conferences that we have. HISAC actually has recorded some of those things. We published that as well. So there are certain sites that I go and listen to that as well.
I like Risky Business. That's actually one of the ones that I like, where they sort of take the week's news and give it to you in half an hour worth of trying to make sure you don't fall behind.
Absolutely, and they actually try to pair up with the technology providers and the experts together. Like if now Steven is part of FireEye, and if you're a FireEye customer, how is Gilead using FireEye and what FireEye is doing, right? So the Risky Business actually will bring some podcasts like that as well. And they try to do
that I like the least. I don't actually like the ones that are podcasts that are basically marketing. Like I just try to avoid those ones.
True, but sometimes it's also when people are exploring technologies, right? So they can understand the use cases of how certain companies are using the products. It actually helps them in that context, but without not to sell the product, but to learn how the use case that they use it.
One of the things that we've done calls on this one, that it's always good to get different brains on this one. If you were to talk about like cyber jobs, meaning like all of them, everything related to security, it's a pretty broad definition, right? A lot of the people when they're especially the people in classes and stuff, they think that like you can't get a cyber job until you're like this packet whispering code writing expert. So it's fun to get other people's perspective on, like, especially on the less technical, not even if you had non-technical, but I mean, like, don't tell me like the most senior job ever. Like, what are the mid-level jobs human beings could actually get that haven't been writing code since they were 5, right?
For me, that I see that if I can put a circle, and you need to kind of break into the circle to get into that. The circle is your cybersecurity career, right? How do you break that circle to get in, right? You have a lot of different avenues to get in. You can be a security operations, right? Be like troubleshooting. I'm great at troubleshooting. If you're curious about certain things, why is this working this way, right? And if you're like, I'm going to break things up, if that's the skill set that you have, then you actually get into security operations, and you'll be a much greater person in that. But sometimes you may be the good person. Actually, you give a problem, you'll actually you'll explore, and you'll read through it, and you'll understand, and kind of structure the solution together. Then you're getting into a security architecture, as an example, right? Or you could be also in a security engineering, where you can actually design a solution and saying this is how it should be architected, and this is how it should be built. The security engineering discipline can also be in a lot of different domains, right? You can have an identity management domain, you have an access management domain, network security, right? You can have platform and endpoint security. There are a lot of different disciplines that you can get into. Or sometimes, I am a good to give me a checklist, and I'm going to ask you for whether you're following the checklist, and if you actually really have the evidences, and you try to test that. And that's where you can get into an auditor type role, right? And you can come and audit. You read my SOP, like a standard operating procedure, or you read my policy. Am I really following that policy or not? You can kind of come back, and then you also look for evidences. How is this policy being enforced, right? Not just to have a paper policy. saying that this is what I do, but the company may not even have controls to implement it, right? So then you can get into an auditor job and you can do that. Or sometimes, you're very good in great in English writing skills, and you can actually have policies and procedures that you can write, right? Now, whether those are interesting jobs or not, after a while you could get bored a little bit of if you're really a security governance person. But you can also be good in training people. If you have a lot of good in front, be in front of people and talk, you can actually have a security awareness training program, right? And you can also you also do management of risk as well. You can look at how do I assess risk, right? What does it really risk in my mind looks like? So there are a lot of different avenues that you can get into cybersecurity. For me, as an example, there are a lot in our organizations, we have VIP support person. They're great at actually interacting with executives, and executives actually will call them and say, "Hey, I see this problem happening. Can you help me?" Right? If we can arm those folks with cybersecurity knowledge, now when you're talking with your executives, you can actually impart that knowledge as well for them, right? Instead of actually having an executive training program. So if you're good in troubleshooting skills, if you understand technology, or if you're curious, that's all it takes for you to get into cyber. You don't need anything else. Everything else will fall in place. I think in the short, I should say that if you have a lot of great soft skills, that's important, right? As an example, if Stephen and myself are dealing with an incident, we need to stay calm. We need to give directions to people, right? And then say, here's what it's happening, be orchestrated, don't panic, right? And sometimes it's common sense, that's all. And if we can apply that and be calm, and that's a great skill for us to be there, and you can be a security professional tomorrow.
It is sort of fun that the career does actually get into like, how good can you think, right? Because like when you're talking to a bunch of execs that are worried about your stock price and how you're going to deal with the PR impacts, and you have to simultaneously tell them, here's why it's not so bad, and here's why it could be horrible, right? And you can lay it all out in a way that they can digest it through their own panic. That's actually really useful, right? Mm-hmm. I like how you talked about that one, because there's like, you sort of think about like, what's your first job in cyber? Your first job in cyber could literally be just the help desk job. It could be, I actually know somebody that his first job in cyber was literally running the cables for somebody that built the data centers. And they were short somebody, and the first time he said, if I tell you what to type, can you configure this router for me, right? And that's how he got into being a network guy. There's a lot of ways in there. It just gets, one of the things I love about cyber is that it's an actual meritocracy. The more you work, the better it functions. The more people want to teach you, which makes you better at what you're doing. So like career path wise, it's just amazing.
At Gilead, we bring in interns as well, right? I'll tell you, we started this program for like at least 4 or 5 years ago. This one intern, this was the first year that this intern joined, right? He's a computer science grad, is in junior year, came and did an internship at Gilead. It's a 12-week program, right? After doing the internship, next year, the person really actually worked for part of law enforcement, right? And that's the internship he's actually doing next year. So that's what drove the person getting into cybersecurity, doing a 12-week engagement, completely hooked on, and saying, this is what I want to do. This is a lot more fun. I like to investigate. I like to do forensic investigation, these type of skill sets that the person acquired. And then the person is actually doing that. So that satisfaction for Stephen and myself, that's enormous. That you're making a difference for somebody, making a career, that they're taking it seriously and they're actually building upon, right? That's what we want for all of you as well, right? So if you have, when in doubt, will I be successful? How do I enter this? That's easy. Just all you need to do is show interest and then put your hands up and say, I'm ready to invest time. If you invest time, I think you will get into cybersecurity. That's all it takes.
There's a question in here that says, can you discuss a security incident you've experienced and the tools you used to diagnose and fix the problem? What were the lessons learned?
I will talk in general, right? Because these are the sessions that, will be recorded and will be posted there. One of the things is like, people will use our own information and they'll come after us, right? People, how do they actually hack into the company organizations? They actually go into LinkedIn and they see the profile. Okay, Stephen does this job for this company. And okay, if I can craft a message like this, and if I send it to Stephen, then Stephen may click on it, right? And so we have too much information about ourselves in the social media and other things, which is not warranted, right? So But in general, I think, I may answer this in a slightly different way. In the past, when law enforcement actually knocks on your door, and then when they say that, then that's a problem. It's a big problem. They don't normally come and knock on your door, which means you have a big incident, something has happened, right? But during the pandemic time, that trend has changed a little bit. But they were being actually knocking on the door to share information because they know that companies like ourselves are building drug to for a good cause and to make sure that it actually saves the world, right? So they want to really partner there, and then they were sharing a lot of intel, like those kind of things. But going back to the previous question, the incidents, uh, probably I can use a well-known one, without attributing to for my experience, like Target, or if I can use something that actually with RSA and Lockheed Martin, right? And sometimes this actors wanted to go after, they may be going after, they have a target to go after, but they may actually use somebody else as a conduit to go after them, right? So then if their target was Lockheed Martin, and if they can actually compromise an RSA technology, and if they can get into Lockheed Martin, and that's what actually happens. So now a lot of different tools, there is never a bulletproof solution that's ever out there. All we can do is make the life difficult for attackers to get in. And the best thing that we can do as an organization is to find out, detect. Your detection capability has to be very, very strong, right? When somebody enters into an organization, it's not like a stash and grab. I'm going to come in, I know exactly where things are, just grab and leave. I know these days the durations are reducing more and more. The attacker communities are being more very smart, and they are actually getting it much faster done. If it's a ransomware, they have reduced the number of days that they can actually impact, right? But still, if your detection process is there, at least you know something wrong is happening, right? And then you can jump onto it. So if you have technologies that can actually help you with a detection mechanism, and then you can actually worry about how do you learn and how do you protect it, and then what are the mitigation solutions. So it's a three-pronged approach, I would say, like detect, protect, and mitigate, right? And if that's where, if your technologies have been mapped around, then you can use it.
That's fascinating, because the way you answered that made me think of something is that, like, you and I, we could talk about the RSA and Lockheed thing, and we know what you're talking about. For everybody else, what we're talking about is the Chinese Red Army was trying to break into Lockheed to steal the plans for the F-22 fighter jet, and they couldn't get in. So instead, they broke into RSA, and they stole all of the seeds for every one of those little keychain, one-time factor tokens they had, all of them in the entire planet, so that they could break into Lockheed. And they conveniently have a stealth fighter jet that looks an awful lot like the F-22 now, right? So when we're talking about things like that, we actually understand what's going on there. We understand that's a supply chain attack. We understand that means that the Lockheed Martin program was working, right? And something about the RSA one didn't. That actually raises a really interesting setup here. Olivia, can you take a note for a future talk? Because there are certain key hacks that would be really useful to have a discussion on. Because like the Target one, the reason why we all talk about that one is because it was a third-party thing. It was their HVAC company that came in. So it was the contractor that got whacked. But even worse than that, they had the technology in place. It did work properly, and it fired. And they had hired a service that was monitoring the thing. And the service told Target, hey, you've got a problem here. And nobody at Target answered their email. Right? So when we're talking about the Target thing, we know all of that when we're talking about it, which is one of those things where you don't need to know every tiny little nuanced thing, but the major ones, the Sony hack, the Target hack, right? We talk about the Capital One hack, which means we all know what that means with your your setups there. The Equifax hack, where they got nailed in 48 hours because they didn't patch their Apache struts, even though the government told them to patch it. They didn't patch it for 92 days when the bad guys were in 48 hours, right? Like Chris and I would know exactly what, we just have to say the Equifax thing, and we know all the rest of that stuff there. So that actually would be worth it to do another one of these talks about those.
Definitely, yeah. I think, from a lessons learned perspective, I think, controls, sometimes, the weakest way, simple controls is what they actually exploit to get in, right? You're either, to Stephen's point, they didn't patch something, or they actually have a simple to easy to guess passwords that they have in your environment, right? And or they can just fish and get in. 95% of the time they fish and get in, right? and then they actually laterally move.
Yeah, it's like there's a learning there though. Like for the people in cyber, there's a curiosity that happens, which is part of like why I enjoy talking to students on this one, because you guys obviously have a curiosity to learn, right? But when the major things happen, like the SolarWinds hack that everybody's doing now, you don't need to read every article there, but you should be able to find out information until you at least know kind of what's the common lore in security, right? Why is it that everybody's freaking out on this, and what is it that's related for 10 parts of the U.S. government and 40 customers of Microsoft, and how is that whole thing connected? And it's fascinating because I was the one in the middle of it. But on that whole kind of thing, you should actually find what are the big major news stories that happen, because they don't happen that often. But when they do, you should be aware of them, because it might actually come up in an interview. Like it could. All right, next question. What's the most common misconception people have when they just started cybersecurity career?
I think, Stephen just touched on that before as well, that you have to be really an expert, that you have to be, I need to be good at certain things for you to actually get there. But sometimes, the curiosity and you actually have a lot of motivation to learn and be curious and then spend the time to get there. I think, and troubleshooting skills is what's important, right? I think that sometimes, one thing that I would say, sometimes people are good at and then they try to lock themselves in certain domain. You need to really have a thought process. There is a mind map. If you guys actually use mind map, you can actually use mind map to build yourself to say, okay, I'm actually going to college, and this is my degree that I'm going to take. Okay, I'm going to get into computer science. And after I finish computer science, here are my few options that I want to get into. And you put your thought process together. And then if you say, if I start cybersecurity as a career, okay, where do I want to start? Do I want to be in the engineering side, or do I want to be in the operations side? Or do I want to be an architect? So if you want to build, or the audit person, if you build that and saying, here are the skills that I need to acquire if I need to be an operations person. So I'm going to get into a troubleshoot by managing a technology solution that's already been deployed, which you learn through trouble tickets and people complaining about this is why it's not working. You learn through that and be curious, and then you try to slowly understand the technology, and then you get into that space, right? And then, but don't get yourself locked in to say that, I want to stay in security operations. You need to find a way to build that career. From security operations, get into security engineering, to be a security architect, define your strategy and roadmap, be a risk management. And if you have done all of those things, then you become a CISO. And obviously with the leadership management and, listen to people, right? Conflict management, people will have their own, managing people is another aspect, right? So technology and cybersecurity is another aspect, but managing people and listening to their problems and actually be them to help them, right? I think that's a different skill set. So if you have put these two things together, then you automatically become a leadership role, right?
There's a whole thing about one of the most important skill sets in all of tech is knowing how to Google things. And I actually mean that for real, right? I mean, like being able to just say like, hey, this isn't working right. And not being the person that gives up. Being the person go like, all right, I'm going to type literally, hey, this stopped working into Google, and trying things. Like that's the magic skill set right there. It's that simple. That actually, my very first job 100 years ago was on a help desk, because I could do that, and Google didn't exist then. Just so we're really clear, this was Yahoo search, which sucked. I was running the desktop group in 6 months because I knew how to just Yahoo search for things at the time. Anyways, that was back when we chiseled computers into stone tablets. All right, next question. In the EMA Pfizer BioNTech compromise, were salient manufacturing processes accessed? Things like RNA synthesis, lipid membrane tech, etc. Did it affect change Gilead's way of operating?
No, and the simple answer is no. But I think because, there are, sometimes, in pharmaceutical and life sciences, these are not options, right? FDA and, EMA and others where we need to actually submit details, in order for us to make sure that we are in the business and have the drug approvals and all of that stuff done, right? But what we learned is through this process, I know within the EMA itself, the investigation is still ongoing, and they haven't actually really completed that. But they went after certain IT applications that they had in the EMA side, right? Now, when you're doing submissions, we always want to make sure that, is there really information needed? Can we redact certain information if it's not needed for the submissions, right? If it's possible. I think those are the business operating model that we actually have looked at. And then we have come back to a conclusion that, there are certain ways that how we submit the data to EMA and others, that those platforms are secure. Due to this incident, those platforms were not impacted, right? But that doesn't mean that, it may not be impacted tomorrow, right? But that's always a constant battle, right? Definitely EMA has given us a lot of things to ponder about, and even SolarWinds has given us a lot of things for us to see, okay, what can we do? How we do third-party risk management, and we don't get into too much sending people questionnaires and asking them to fill the questionnaires and getting a responses back alone. And people will feel like, oh, I have a checklist and I'm happy that I'm doing something, but that's not really a control that's working, right? How do you really dig deeper and work with your key partners, and then making sure that they have the right level of control? But not only that, how do you actually implement them within your own environment as well, right? One, they can have all the great controls on their side, but if you actually have a poor implementation within your environment, you're still going to get impacted, right? So it needs to be a common balance that you need to derive that before you actually get to that.
Yeah, that actually reminds me, just as a job, there's a lot of places that are expanding their third-party risk programs right now, and that the entry level, that would actually be more administrative than experienced, right? You have to be somebody that would be really good at being able to repeatedly ask a chunk of questions and get answers and interpret what those answers are and be able to handle that one. But like there's 1,000 people who do that for Bank of America, for example. I mean, there's a lot of those jobs, and it's going to get way worse with the SolarWinds hack.
Absolutely. And in June timeframe, just to touch on that, Stephen, in June timeframe, we'll have one of our cohorts on a vendor called CyberGRX. They are actually partnering with them. They have signed for us. Their main job is actually third-party risk management itself. So we'll be offering that course as well through NextGen. So if you're interested, to Stephen's point, I think that's a nice way to get into that area.
All right, the next one. What do employers look for regarding certifications or schooling when trying to break into the cybersecurity field?
Yeah, so the typical ones, CISSP, depending on the roles and the level that you're applying for, CISM. Sometimes you also have CEH, like ethical hacker type certifications, depending on the role. If you're getting into security operations, and if you want to join as a red team tester as a role, the ethical hacking and the penetration testing type certification that you have, that's a good one to have. But the CISSP and CISM and all of that will get you the discipline, right? Because you got certification doesn't mean that you have all the skill set and you can do it. That gives you the fundamental entry door to that. What I typically suggest is, instead of spending more time on certifications initially, join the company, do the job, and through the company, take the certifications. That actually builds you through the career, right? The certification is just for this recruiters to actually pick up your resume and to say, okay, this person is a security person. Okay, I'm going to apply, make him go connect him with this company. I think that's all the certifications actually helps you to get into the door. But if you know the connections, this is what I would do. If I know that I want to get into security, and if you know which industry that you want to get into, go into LinkedIn, find out all the people, and reach out to them saying that this is what I'm interested, right? And a lot more people will actually give you and will talk to you as well. And if you go and tell them, hey, I don't have the CISSP, will you not take me for a job? And if somebody says that, no, you don't have a CISSP, that's why you don't get a job, you should talk to me and Steve, and we are happy to give them a call.
Yeah, you don't want to work for that company anyways. So
Exactly. Exactly.
The one that I do is I actually suggest people do sort of a reverse search off of that. So when you find out all the certifications, now go do job searches where you type in that, like CISSP, and look at the jobs that come up that say CISSP required or desired, right? Because if those sound interesting, then maybe you go for that one, right? Or what are the job listings that talk about have the CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, right? Because it gets you ideas as to where each one ends up going, right? So if you saw, Security Plus, those will be pretty entry level. They will. I mean, I don't hire based off of Security Pluses anymore, but you can get that in a couple of weeks, right? Whereas CISSP, I got to tell you, when I got that one almost, 15 years ago when I got mine. It was the worst test I've ever taken in my entire life. it was 6 hours of triple negative questions. Like, which one of these would you not do if you didn't want to not have blah, right? I mean, it was horrible. But that was how they made it rare at the time. I've heard that the test's a little easier now.
So
How much coding is involved in cybersecurity? That's actually a really good question.
It depends on the role, right? And for me, that if you're in security engineering, and it depends on the company as well. For the company that you're working on, some companies, for me, as an example, at Gilead, we buy a lot of the commercial off-the-shelf products, right? So we have to customize things and build things on. But if you're in the security operations, if I'm going to be a red team tester or a penetration tester, sometimes you want to build code and you have to actually have some scripts written and all of that. So it's depending on the role and depending on the organization that you're joining in, right? So this will be very helpful. But don't lose. I think having a strong coding skill set is important. You'll always use in some shape or form, right? But I wouldn't say that's mandatory. But if you have those skills, the entry level jobs are much easier to get, because then you can build it and you have a lot of those. Like if you're getting into identity management, if you actually have Java or HTML, REST APIs and JSON and different things that you have those type of skill set building in, then you can get into ID management, access management, those kind of jobs, right? Or if you're in security operations, if you, Stephen may not like this, but PowerShell scripts, or if you have a lot of scripts that you need to build, right? Those are things very helpful. The reason I said Stephen may not like it, sometimes this scheduled task and things that you can actually build and leave it out there environment could be an opportunity for somebody to get in as well, right? So you need to build it and use it in the right way.
Yeah, my version of that answer would be that like you're in cyber, you're almost, unless you're writing cyber tools, at which point I would say it's a software development job. You're not writing Java, you're not going to write C#. It's not a C++. That's not what we do. Everybody does scripting, and it's getting even more so. And quite honestly, the people that have been doing it for as long as Krishnan and I have been doing, if we didn't grow up writing code, it's way harder to learn how to write code when you're 50 than when you're 20, right? So being the person that says, I think cyber's really cool, and by the way, I happen to know Python, yeah, that's probably going to get you a job right there, right? I mean, like seriously, right there. Even the Windows admins, they do everything on PowerShell now. It's just the way it goes. Like the networking guys resist it the most. Actually, I don't know why. Every network person I've ever met, they like still want to log onto a damn console and type commands in. But
yeah, I totally agree.
All right, next question. Equifax had somebody with degrees in music as a chief security officer during the data breach. What was your initial reaction when you heard that news, or reactions around it?
I'm trying to music as a degrees in music, yeah. And then somebody. I mean, for me, that degree doesn't matter. Meaning, for me, that I'm a math background, and then how I got into the job, right? But then, whatever the degrees that you have, it's actually for your promotions in certain level. But once you have do you have really the skill set, right? And what happened, and how you could have prevented it from there, right? And what are the programs that you've actually done? That discipline is much more important, right? But these days, I know that getting in is easy, but what you do, I would say that there are three strikes, right? People will look at, if there is an attack that actually happens and people get into the environment, that's your first strike, which means something that you had a hole in your environment that actually helped somebody to get in, right? Okay, now after they get in, what did you do as a CISO to actually prevent that getting more worse? How did you orchestrate that incident? How did you manage that incident, right? And if I do not manage that incident pretty well, and if I messed up in that aspect, that's your second strike, right? Sometimes, after I go through this incident, okay, what did you do as a postmortem in the end? What are the lessons learned that you did, so that make sure that that doesn't happen again. So if you don't have a lot of great ideas how you're going to come up with, how you're going to prevent it from in the future, if you're not able to do the after lessons learned, all those three strikes is what actually gets you out of the job. Some companies have tolerance level. You let me in the first place, you did not do a job, Krish, you're fired, right? So it could be the first time. Sometimes companies will say, okay, these days, getting in is easy. but at least can you actually prevent this and orchestrate it and have an incident pretty well done, right? So for me, that whether it's a degree in that is a reaction or not, what did he do? How did the person actually orchestrate that? How did they actually manage the incident? And how did they report back? That's important. Probably, Stephen, you may have a different opinion on that, but.
No, actually, the funny part is that go back to the thing I said about cyber being a meritocracy, right? It depends on how good you are at what you do and how hard you work, right? So like my first degree was a business administration degree. It was my second and third degrees that were cyber degrees, right? My chief financial officer, his first degree was computer science, right? One of the best Amazon security people I have, she has a biology degree. I mean, like the degree sort of matters, but it's more a matter of how do you get your first, maybe your second job. And then your interest will take you off in the direction. It's one of the best parts about tech, right? You get pulled up ladders unless you really don't want to get pulled up the ladder. In cyber alone, there are 1 million more jobs than there are human beings. That's just the truth. I can't steal Krish's employees. He can't steal mine often enough for me to fill every position I've got. The human beings don't exist, right? Just the way that whole thing goes. Actually, the funny part, when you talk about the Equifax person having a music degree, I felt bad for them that was called out. The funny part is I don't think the music degree had anything to do with them being crappy at the job of being a CISO, right? I actually don't think they did very good things over there, but the person's degree 20 years before had nothing to do with it, right? At SolarWinds, they were a private equity company and they didn't have a CISO at all. They just didn't have anybody in the role at all, right? And you go like, does that matter? Well, maybe. You could run it without somebody with the title or not. I mean, like if you only had 100 employees, you don't need a CISO at that point, right? So at what point do you get one? Anyways, next question is interesting. What types of cybersecurity compliance standards do you have to meet as a bioscience company? Hipaa, I'm sure, but anything else that we should put on our radar?
Yeah, definitely. We have a 21 CFR Part 11, right, which is very specific for, in the life sciences, you will hear a term called GXP, right? The X is actually, which you can replace it. It's a good manufacturing practices, good clinical practices, good laboratory practices, right? That's what the M and the C and the L has been replaced as GXP, right? So when you get into the GMP area, that's where the 21 CFR Part 11 requirements is important, right? We need to make sure we go through a lot of, it's more about the process on how do you test systems, how do you actually have the protocols written, right? And how do you actually manage the documentation that you have, making sure that you have a design and a system functioning in accordance with the standards and the documentation that you've built. That's important from an FDA perspective, right? This is not for every system that's there. There are certain systems that actually have been classed, it's been categorized as GXP systems, right? That's what's important. Hipaa, it's like if you're getting in clinical trial data, patients' data, but most of the time in certain life sciences companies, that's not relevant because you could actually have a lot of the times your master data, right? It's not in clear text. We do not know that this is really a patient associated with that clinical trial information, right? As long as that's been masked, so sometimes the Hipaa may not apply. But privacy, GDPR compliance, CCPA, and depending on where you're operating under, there are a lot of privacy regulations. Now, China, as an example, they have the China cybersecurity law, which actually has both the security aspect and the privacy aspect. But if you have followed a lot of the GDPR standards, the CCPA and others, like California Consumer Privacy Act, right, and as well as the Brazil and different regulation that's there. If you have a good foundation in what you've done for GDPR, I think you can actually extend that for most of the regulations there as well.
There's a fun data science tie into that also, where you were talking about like having a bunch of data on like your drug trials without it being PII because you don't actually know the human being behind it, right? There are actually some interesting data science challenges on just how much do you have to anonymize that to make it actually mathematically provable to no longer be PII, right? And I saw one that they did in the UK where they just removed everybody's names and they had no names and no addresses. All they had was male, age 51. Here's the medical record associated with this person and what they had done. That was it. And a reporter had gone through that database and they figured like, okay, Tony Blair, we know his age. We know when he went in for a heart surgery. That narrowed it down to one of these 4 people. They then went through some social media posts and they said, I found, Tony Blair's health record in this anonymized data. It was fascinating, which get into that whole sort of like the intersection of data nerd and privacy relevancy and all that kind of stuff. It was cool. All right, next question. How was the transition from finance to bioscience? Was it a challenge to change industries?
Initially, it was for sure, right? When you come in, when you work in a financial industry, you have security as it's utmost important, right? You have to lock everything down, and if you don't do it, then then you're not doing a job, right? But when you get into bioscience space, right, you need to give them the flexibility, striking that balance that I talked about initially, the user experience and security. I think, sometimes you're like, what do you mean that, you need to go to the site and visit the site and bring this data, and you don't want to actually have any kind of content categorization and block anything. When you hear certain things initially, when those are the requirements, it may drive you nuts, right? But then after that, you understand that the actual business background, the business need, and trying to give them the flexibility, your mindset had to change a little bit to say, okay, the fear factor should not be always there to actually depict on what you need to do. Okay, this is a challenge that I'm going to take on. I'm going to figure out a way that I'm going to let the business do what they need to do, but I'm also making sure that security is be there and we make it a little bit invisible for them, right? But we'll actually protect the company as well. So that adjustment, it's not natural. Sometimes it takes time for you to get frustrated, and over time, and once you understand that you need to be a really good partner and work with the business, understand their need, and don't come as a no sayer and then saying I'm going to stop you from doing it. That will not make you popular. And if you're really being in life sciences industry, right, you need to be able to articulate, understand the business need, and actually make them help and make them understand the risk. And if you do this, this is what's happened. This is what is going to happen. Do you want me to really allow? Do you want to really go through that process again, right? And then they may come back and say, you know what, tell me if there is an alternate way to do it, right? Without impacting them and what they have to do. That balance is and that's what you need to get more closer to in biosciences and life sciences as well. Probably other industries may be relevant, maybe similar, right? But financial is more the topmost, more secure areas that you can see some companies.
So they have the money, right? I mean, they can hire and buy a lot of stuff, and they're the most regulated, or among the most regulated, right?
Yeah.
I actually am going to drop because I have a call with my Singapore team, so I'm going to hang up. The next question, though, you can take over as soon as I hang up. It says, how long is the training program, and how long after we complete the program do we start the internship? And I'll see you all in about 2 weeks.
Sure. Thanks, Steven. I think the training program that we have is at most maximum of 160 hours, maximum of 4 weeks. And we wanted to make sure that every training program fits into that schedule, right? After that's done, it takes typically, sometimes for the internships, there is a certain duration, right? So most companies take internships from April all the way through August, right? And sometimes a little bit into September. If you're looking for internships during that time frame, it's easy. We'll have a lot more opportunities to get you the job right there, right? Full-time jobs, there are plenty that's out there. We can always get those jobs as well. I would say roughly we are looking at 6 to 8 weeks to actually identify the opportunity and then make you apply there as well. That's the trend we are looking at. But I wanted to stay ahead of that problem, right? I want to have more jobs identified as we are coming in, and that's where we have some data science and some tools that we're putting in. We're creating jobs. We're making our networking channel much more powerful. We're going to all those companies before they even try to post it, right? Recently, I was talking to somebody in LinkedIn, and they said, I haven't posted this 4 internship jobs, Chris. I'm looking for somebody. Before they posted it, we actually got the jobs. And now for the first pilot cohorts, we're actually submitting them for LinkedIn jobs as well. So over time, that we will have more supply, and we'll try to curate a lot more demand that's there, right, to match the supply that we have. More candidates getting trained, and then be able to put you in job as well.
Kristen, do you know when you're going to open up applications for the next cohort?
Uh,
This
it will
spring?
be next. It'll be next week, Olivia. So we have the March 15th. We have the Securonics second cohort is starting. So that application we are planning to post next week.
That's coming up pretty quick. Great.
Pretty quick, yeah. And then we will have a couple of courses starting in April, and then we'll have May. So that I'm planning to publish probably end of this month.
Well, I have one last question. I was on a call this morning, and one of the things that came up was, there all of these millions of jobs are the main reason there's so many openings is that cybersecurity is so hard to get into if you're new. And they talked about, the things you talked about, the power skills might give you an edge. And certainly what you're doing with next gen cyber talent, but what can what can be done? What are some of the other things that we can do? We right now we see, SOCs as a way to get into this industry. And you talked about security awareness, but what can we do to start identifying more entries into this? I'm talking from an educator. Now I'm talking from that perspective. What can we do to make this an easier field to break into?
I think the more technology providers that we actually onboard on the next gen platform and we offer the trainings, Olivia, I think that will actually make it. My goal by end of June, I would actually have one provider for each of the verticals, each of the domain. I'll have a provider in identity management. I'll have a provider in access management. I'll have a provider in network security. Network security is actually an ocean by itself, right? When I say network security, we'll have Palo Alto, which actually does a lot of the firewalls, the cloud security and all of that. We'll have, CASB, like a cloud access broker solution. There are a lot of different subsections within network security. We'll have signed up a couple of providers in that. And then we'll have risk management providers. We'll have, audit management providers as well who's providing it. We'll have privacy specialists, right, who's doing privacy training. All of these things having, that way, if I can have 30 students per cohort, and if I can have about 7 or 8 technology providers that I've signed up in each of the domain, and if I can do 3 or 4 cohorts per year, you can do the math, right? So 30 times 7 is 210 times 4. That's the number of students that we can actually put out there who actually has technology experience in the domain. Then you're no longer a starter. You already have technology that you've worked on, and you have an experience, right? Now, I'm also going to turn the ball around to say to the technology companies, put them on internship jobs on your level. Securonics, take all of the students into your jobs and put them in so that they can show that experience already there. So you're no longer a person who just passed out and have a degree, and you're trying to learn and be an entry-level person, right? That's the top, that's where you're going to make it a little bit of a difference. And I think then it'll make it easier.
Well, it's 7 o'clock. I think there's one last thing. There was a question about, well, where can they find the application? nextgencybertalent.com. Keep an eye on that site for the application. And then as soon as we are aware that the application is open, we will post an announcement of that the application is open on the bayict.org site.
Yeah.
Thank you, Krishnan, for your time. And really appreciate all that you're doing to close that gap. And hopefully we have some candidates here that participate that are looking forward to that application being available. So.
Definitely, Olivia. I think, I'm really excited. We had some courageous students who come through. Sheila is one of them, right? Who actually took on the program, and, we want more, right? So I think, more people who have shown interest, I think the demand, we will get there, right? So as you can imagine that I'm already talking about, I want to get 800 students per year, right? Yeah. I think we can definitely make it happen. This is just, we're talking about purely on Bay Area, right? And then now we want to do this multiple chapters throughout the states as well. Then you're really causing a multiplier effect. but I want to thank each one of you for giving me the time and the opportunity. I know some questions I dodged it for a reason. When we do a next session where we're not recording it, then I can tell you even more. Then I'll be happy to share a lot more details, because when you actually have this information and when you post it out there, right, I don't want to give out too many information as well. So I kept myself a little bit, may have dodged the bullet here and there, but I'm happy to share a lot more details.
Well, in fact, that's been an issue on a lot of the talks that we've had because they really can't give a lot of the specifics. We'll have to figure out how we do those in the future. Maybe we won't record them, or maybe we'll have a non-recorded one. So.
No, actually, we may be able to do certain questions, keep it in the end, stop the recording, and let's answer.
Yeah, that might be where the last 15 minutes we stop recording and we can ask the juicy questions. Yeah.
Exactly.
Before we end, Chaz, you have a question?
Yes, Olivia, what is the website for the next gen?
Next Gen cybertalent.com.
Cyber talent?
Yeah, there it is. It's in the chat box.
Yeah.
Also, do you have his email for Krishnan?
Yeah, you can give it to them.
Your Gmail account?
Yeah, Gmail. Let me put it there. Yeah.
Why don't you put that in there? Yeah. There we go. Krishnan, Steve always says, hook up with me in LinkedIn. That might be a way too. And then also there's a LinkedIn page for Next Gen Cyber Talent. So follow that, and you'll be following, Krishnan and all he's doing as well. And there's the email.
Thank you, Olivia.
All right.
Thank you, Krishnan.
Thank you.
All right. Any other last questions? All right. Well, thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And we'll see you next month.
Thanks,
Oh,
Olivia.
all right.
Bye.
Krishnan,
All right.
nice to see you guys.
Same here. Bye.
Bye.